David Feherty has spent 30 years making golf laugh. The wit, the accent, the irreverence, the ability to turn a missed putt into the funniest moment on television. But behind the performance that kept everyone entertained was a life that had very little to laugh about. And now, at 67, the career he gambled on a league that is collapsing has left him in a place he could not have predicted. Here's the full story. Born in Bangor, Northern Ireland in 1958, Feherty grew up in a different era of the sport. He turned professional and built a legitimate career on the European Tour, representing Ireland internationally and captaining the victorious 1990 Alfred Dunhill Cup team before playing for Europe at the 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island. By the standards of the sport, he was accomplished. He was not, however, one of the all-time greats, and he seemed to understand that about himself in a way that freed him. When the playing career wound down, Feherty reinvented himself so completely and so successfully that the broadcasting version became far more famous than the playing one ever was. He joined CBS Sports in 1997 as an on-course reporter and built something rare in sports television. A genuine personality, not a studio personality, not a polished analyst reading from notes, but a human being standing in the rough near the 14th green with a microphone and a willingness to say the thing everyone else was thinking but nobody else was permitted to say. The wit was relentless and self-deprecating. The broadcast team at CBS that included Jim Nantz and Nick Faldo became appointment television, partly because of how different Feherty was from everyone around him. He was the chaos agent, who somehow made the whole production feel warmer. He once described himself as a recovering alcoholic, who was not always recovering, and not always an alcoholic, which was darkly funny and completely honest at the same time. The golf world adored him. The gallery crews at every major asked to be near him. He became arguably the most beloved broadcaster in the sport's history. He had his own interview show on Golf Channel called Feherty that ran for years and captured everyone from Tiger Woods to Charles Barkley in exactly the unguarded conversations that long-form television makes possible, when the interviewer is genuinely interesting enough to make the subject lower their defenses. Nobody lowered defenses better than Feherty, because he had none of his own left. But none of that warmth was built on an easy foundation. The drinking had been a problem for years, the kind of years you lose in fragments and try to reconstruct later. Feherty has spoken with extraordinary openness about what alcohol did to him, about the periods of genuine darkness, about the version of himself that he had to fight against every single day. He entered rehabilitation multiple times. He wrote about it, talked about it on television, turned his own brokenness into a conversation the sport had not been willing to have with itself. That vulnerability was not performance, it was the realest thing about him. He lost a CBS colleague, radio partner, and genuine friend in Mark Rolfing in 2018. He has buried people he loved across a career lived publicly in ways that most humans are spared. But none of that warmth was built on an easy foundation. The drinking had been a problem for years, the kind of years you lose in fragments and try to reconstruct later. Feherty has spoken with extraordinary openness about what alcohol did to him, about the periods of genuine darkness, about the version of himself that he had to fight against every single day. He entered rehabilitation multiple times. He wrote about it, talked about it on television, turned his own brokenness into a conversation the sport had not been willing to have with itself. That vulnerability was not performance, it was the realest thing about him. And then, in 2018, his son Shay died. Shay Feherty was 29 years old, and he died of an accidental drug overdose. The loss of a child is a specific category of grief that changes every other grief that comes before or after it. People who knew Feherty at the time have said the period that followed was among the darkest of his life. A man who had already survived decades of his own addictions, now trying to survive something far more devastating than any he had personally endured. He kept working, he kept talking. He kept making the galleries laugh, and underneath all of it, he was carrying something that nobody who watched him on television could see. By 2021, Feherty had left CBS and was working at NBC and Golf Channel. The career was still intact, still celebrated, still producing the moments that kept him in everyone's top 10 of golf broadcasting. His interview show, which had run for years on Golf Channel, captured the game's biggest personalities in a format that suited him perfectly. Long conversations, no agenda, the kind of interview that feels like two people talking rather than one person extracting quotes from another. Quick pause. If David Feherty is one of the most genuinely entertaining figures golf has ever produced, type the voice of golf in the comments. If his personal story moves you beyond anything he ever said on television, type more than a broadcaster. I read every single one. Then came 2022, and the decision that changed his career's final chapter. Feherty joined LIV Golf as a broadcaster. He was clear about his reasons, candid in a way that was either brave or naive depending on your view. It was about the money. He said it plainly, without the rationalizations that surrounded so many of LIV's signings. He was not going to pretend he was reshaping the sport or fighting for player rights. The money was generational, and he took it. Arlo White, his broadcast partner, made the same calculation, leaving a celebrated NBC Premier League announcing career to cross the divide. For 3 years, Feherty was the most recognizable voice on LIV's broadcasts. He brought everything he had always brought: the wit, the warmth, the ability to make uncomfortable situations feel lighter, to a product that desperately needed those things. LIV's critics were everywhere. Its production values were inconsistent, its legitimacy was constantly questioned. But nobody questioned whether Feherty belonged in a broadcast booth. And then, in early 2026, the news broke that Saudi Arabia's public investment fund was pulling its money from LIV at the end of the season. The league that had spent 4 years and billions of dollars challenging the establishment was fighting for its survival. And David Feherty, broadcasting live when the rumors first surfaced, defended the league on air. He called the reports nonsense. He pushed back on the speculation. He presented confidence about a future that apparently nobody had shared with him. Because when the news became official and reporters tracked him down, Feherty admitted in a text message that he had been completely in the dark. He had gone on air to defend LIV's stability without any awareness of what was actually happening with the funding. He said he was in the dark just like everyone else. Whether LIV simply failed to prepare its broadcasters, or whether Feherty was kept away from information that might have softened his willingness to defend the league publicly, the outcome was the same. The most trusted voice on LIV Golf's broadcast turned out to have no more insight into the league's future than a viewer watching from home. That revelation landed hard, partly because of who Feherty is. His entire broadcast identity rested on authenticity. The drunk jokes, the grief, the openness about his son, the willingness to be honest about himself at every uncomfortable turn. All of that made him someone you trusted to tell you what he actually thought. Discovering that he was repeating talking points he had not verified, without any awareness of the reality behind them, undercut something that had always felt reliable. At 67, Feherty now faces a broadcasting future as uncertain as anything he has known in his career. LIV's collapse will not leave his CV unmarked. The PGA Tour's audience, which he spent years building loyalty with, watched him take the Saudi money and defend the league that divided the sport. The executives at NBC and CBS who might be inclined to bring him back face real questions from their own newsrooms about what he represents. The beloved figure has been made complicated by decisions that were, at the time, entirely rational. What makes it heartbreaking is not the broadcasting politics, it is the timing. A man who survived genuine addiction, who buried his son at 29, who rebuilt himself multiple times from difficult places, made a financial decision in his mid-60s that seems likely to cost him the professional legacy he spent 3 decades building. He is not broke, he is not broken. But at 67, watching the league that paid him collapse while his old relationships in the sport sit on the other side of a divide he created, the path back to the career he once had is longer than it should be for someone who gave that much to the game. The golf world's reaction to his LIV years has been complicated. Players who knew and loved him never turned on him the way some of the punditry did. The warmth people feel toward Feherty is real, and it does not disappear simply because he made a professional decision they disagreed with. But the broadcasting landscape is colder than the golf world. Executives at networks calculate audience trust, and Feherty, having gone on air to defend something he knew nothing about, is the kind of moment that leaves a residue. His next employer will know the story. He is still David Feherty. He still has the wit and the warmth and the most distinctive voice in the sport's broadcasting history. If the right door opens, he will walk through it and remind everyone why there was never anyone quite like him. But at 67, after everything he has survived and everything he chose to risk, the odds of the career returning to its previous heights are not what they were. And that is genuinely sad, because golf was funnier and more human every single time he was near a microphone. If this story meant something to you, drop a like before you scroll away. It is the single biggest thing that tells the algorithm to push these stories to the people who care about golf beyond the scorecard. And subscribe if you want more of these, the kind that take the long view. There are more coming.